Hi, welcome to the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel, and we have a fantastic guest with us all the way from San Diego in California, Reena. Hello, Reena. Welcome. I'll introduce you properly shortly. Just to remind you, this is a live show. It'd be lovely to hear from you. We're streaming on several platforms at the same time. So Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, which is Twitter. I still actually have never watched a Periscope, so I don't even know how that is or how it works, but I'm assured we're on it. It's also, because it's live, be great. You can give us a call and join us if you like. This evening, I'm going to be talking to Reena. We've got a slightly truncated show because she's a busy mum and professional, so she has to get off to work and then go and pick her kids up from school. So we'll be about 45 minutes rather than an hour. So, but join us if you can. Call in if you wish. 07506 319 745. Hello, Reena.
Hi.
Welcome. How is it in sunny San Diego?
Well, you can't complain. It's
No.
it's everything that you hear. I always tell people it is nice. Every time we get to go out to dinner or go anywhere, we always bump into tourists. So it is a destination spot where everybody wants to come to. So we're very fortunate to be
I've
living.
been. It is gorgeous. I mean, I have to say you have one of the nicest railway stations that I've ever come across.
Oh
And
yes. So
lovely.
you've done the train. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And some of the smartest panhandlers at that railway station who were
That's
very, very skilled at
yes.
their job and very sort of courteous as well, I have to say. For panhandlers were very, very courteous, and I was very happy to sort of partake of their services, and they told me all about the history saying. And the other thing was seeing the Marines. That was very odd. So it's
Yeah.
very strange. Have you seen that film Battle Los Angeles? It's takes place in San Diego. I think it's one of the best alien invasion movies ever.
No, I mean I've seen Top Gun. Top Gun is based in Corn Island, San Diego. I've seen some of the other movies, but no, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. San Diego is gorgeous, and I'm hoping to get over there later this year, actually. So I'll come and buy you.
Oh, exciting. Well, proud that you love this city.
It's great. And California as well. I mean, it's an awesome place. So how have things been for the last year for you? How's it been going over there?
I think like many of us, we weathered the storm, and it is nice to feel that there's light at the end of the tunnel here, as we would say. And my children, I have three children, two of who are older, who fit in the US the bracket for vaccination. And so not only are my husband and I vaccinated, but my two older children are. And so you have, as a parent, a sense of relief. In terms of work, as you must know too, in the field of psychology, we've had an uptick of an increase in just general mental health challenges, understandably, especially due to all this secondary trauma. So it is a little bit of a wave, but we're all excited for the summer. I do have to say, just seeing the energy and the excitement when people are out and about. In California, after June 15th, we don't have to wear our masks anymore. So that's a huge step.
Yeah. Not even indoors. Is that going to be the new?
Yeah, it'll be up to the institutions, right? And so a lot of them are very comfortable, and it is the honor system. I mean, some places will ask for a vaccination card, they call it vaccination passport or whatnot, but most restaurants, and they're very comfortable. I was just up in Orange County last weekend, and that particular restaurant was very comfortable for me not wearing my mask to walk to my table, which is a huge
interesting
step.
thing about California is it's had a very, I think, successful and progressive response to the pandemic. And your Governor Newsom, I'm not political about this, but has seemed to have taken it very seriously and worked very diligently to protect people and put in place sort of very quite stringent public health measures, in opposition to, say, places like Florida, which just seem to have not bothered, but it's been very interesting to watch. And as a result, it seems to me California is in a really good place coming out of the pandemic, having saved a lot of lives and moving on in terms of economics. Because California, people don't know, there's 40 million people, I think, who live in California. It's a sort of hugely, at times, densely populated state, which is ripe for viral infection. It's very similar in some ways to the UK.
Yeah, you can't distance yourself, right? You can't, and I think it's so relative, because I think about our state and I think about other countries, and then I think about third world countries like India, where you can't even socially distance, you don't have the mitigation in place. And so we feel very fortunate. We're both empirically based, data driven person in general. So I definitely personally followed the science. I follow the rules. I knew what I needed to do. And we have Center for Disease Control, which is a great resource that a lot of us refer to for CDC, just to know, even for example, as people want to travel, we're all looking, okay, where can we go this summer? What is acceptable, what's not? And that's our pretty much our go-to guide.
It's amazing, isn't it? That there's this experience. It's like when you're talking, I'm going, yeah, that's exactly what we're all talking about here. It's exactly the same experience. And there's something very interesting. And I don't want to downplay the tragedy of there's 3.5 million people now that have died worldwide, and it's continuing. Pandemic is certainly not over, particularly in places such as India, Brazil, etc. It's raging away. And it was good to hear the G7 commit itself to trying to vaccinate the world. And I'm very, pleased that our Prime Minister is saying, no, we want to get it all done next year. Sort of not wait for 3 or 4 years. No, we've got the vaccines, let's just go and do it. So that's an appropriate collective responsibility, I think. And it's good to hear that. But it's interesting to me that, we have such similar experiences being on other side of the world to each other. Yet this thing, has the capacity to sort of, if you like, drop to that sort of universal level of, well, we're all...
Yeah, and it's interesting too. It's hearing you talk about how countries are coming together. When I work with families and children, we have this conversation about the importance of being a global citizen and looking beyond just a few feet in front of you or just your community, and what can we do to contribute to this world. And so many of us over this past year is talking about you see what a privileged person has access to versus someone who isn't, and the disparities. And one of the things that my family, that I even talk to my clients about, is it's okay to be privileged. It's what is it that you're going to do about it? And how are you going to use that privilege to help? And so not to be ashamed, not to be, goodness me, I have access. I was able to be the first one. Let's say someone says, first one to get vaccinated, do your job to get vaccinated, but then what can you do to educate, empower others? And so that's what's nice to see about the countries that do have access to things and how they're providing vaccinations to those that don't.
I think there's a real opportunity here to re-establish this sense that we're a world community, and not give in to, because I think not so long ago it seemed like sort of very inward-looking nationalist thoughts and politics were taking over. And I don't know about you, but I found it quite odd and at times quite upsetting and difficult to sort of watch that sort of stuff, because as somebody who's psychologically minded, I understand that fundamentally we're social animals.
Right.
Profoundly depend upon each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Human beings, and so many of us have altruistic just it's built into us. And so just to think that you felt a lot of the depression, sadness, so much helplessness, hopelessness really was attributed to this pandemic, right? The feeling of you couldn't help anyone. What can I do?
What's interesting, and I was talking to some friends about it today, as we move beyond into the sort of post-pandemic or whatever we want to call it world, is that there are certain things that I really want to hold on to which have been of benefit during this period of time. One thing being that I'm much closer to the people that I love without a doubt. And that became such an important thing. I mean, I had to really think about, well, what is important? What am I going to hold on to when I go into lockdown? And also that's extended to my relationships with local neighbours and shopkeepers and the people that come in and clean the building, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a much greater sense of recognising what is actually important for me locally. I don't know, has that been similar for you or?
Yes, I across the board, and yes, personally as well, and just deeper connections, the importance of really being mindful, checking in on everyone. One of the things, that just in general that I really do and want to do and continue to do is, checking in, connecting, some more simplicity, right? Things a little bit more simple in life, and reprioritizing, taking off. You hear this a lot in conversation, but just taking things that really carry a lot of weight, don't bring that purposefulness in your life. Do we really need it? It's like, this is a great time moving forward to just, clean out the stuff, do your spring cleaning, and really even mentally do that too. And I love that companies, employers are really looking at that as well, and allowing for people to continue to work from home, finding ways to focus on wellness in their practice is nice as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I'm going to come to that in a bit. I'd like to talk to you more about this work from home phenomenon, because my sense is that the pandemic has moved certain types of experiences on very rapidly, like a war does. Everybody knows that during the war you have this technological advance. You advance 10 years technologically, but things have happened similarly in the pandemic in terms of social structures, the online world, the work from home movement, etc., etc. I want to come back to that, but we jumped into an interesting conversation because that's what we do. We're both psychologically minded, so we immediately start identifying with each other as human beings. And I haven't really given you the opportunity to say who you are and what you do, and so I need to go back a little bit of you. So Reena is a psychologist, a child psychologist. Okay, and a family specialist. So tell me about that. Tell me about what is a psychologist? What's a child psychologist? And why would you involve families? Surely you just treat the kids and sort of tell the families to go away.
I was originally a chemistry major. I wanted to go into pharmacy, and I loved the sciences. I always had a fascination. And midway into college, I was taking at the university, we call them elective courses, and a lot of them were psychology courses. And in my high school experience, I never took a class. I didn't know what it was. And I was so fascinated with behavior in the mind and why humans do what they do. And I just, but I always had an interest in working with children from a young age. And so I basically switched degrees real fast and graduated with a psychology degree, and went on to do graduate work here near Loyola Marymount University. But I was doing an internship at UCLA, which was they had a psychiatric hospital. Yeah. And on that floor, I didn't realize what I was getting into or what it was called or anything like that. But I definitely worked specifically with severe behavior disorders. So severe autism, childhood schizophrenia. And they trained me to be a behavioral therapist. And while I was doing that internship and gaining some experience, I was getting 2 masters, one in counseling psychology and the other one in educational psychology, because I myself growing up, I didn't learn how everyone else learned. It was just very unique to me. And so I was always fascinated on learning, just tapping into different modalities of learning. So I graduated with those degrees, immediately went to work into a school system as a school psychologist, and assessing and testing kids and identifying those who had challenges that impacted their school day, their school learning, socialization, speech, you name it. But many years down the line, I opened up my private practice, but wanted to train some more and specialize in behavior. And so we have this term called BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst. And pretty much not just exclusive to children or exclusive to individuals who have a label or a disability. Corporations hire behavior analysts because it's really how to make your workflow more efficient, how to increase productivity. Let's say there's need for mediation, there's conflict, asking the why. Every type of behavior has some type of form or communication, right? And so I just was fascinated in that and continued on in my practice, would take on a bunch of cases, see individuals through therapy. Now you work with children, you automatically work with families.
I agree with you. I don't think it is automatic. I think if you're sensible, you do.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that you can work with them individually, but a lot of the supports. I mean, the one misconception, right?
I would be stronger than that, Reena. I would say it's a waste of time trying to treat children on their own outside of their family. I think it's a lot. It's
a whole, yeah.
No,
it is. It's so much, and there's research behind this. When I would counsel and children, one of the things I would always say too is things are not effective unless they can apply it outside of the clinical setting, right? We have to be able to take it out and generalize it.
Absolutely spot on. If you can't it's not transferable, it's a waste of time.
Yes, and so we've got to practice this. We've got to talk, we've got to do this there's homework to do. People always come to us and they think we're here to solve their problem. And the answer is no, you're going to do it, but we're here to help you and give you the tools that you need. And so family, it just naturally was part of my approach.
It's hilarious because as we're talking, I got a message through from a mum, and we're arranging a family session for Saturday, and the message is, oh, X is trying to get out of the country to avoid us, so we've got to sort of rearrange the meeting, because I mean, I call it systemic work. I don't know what you call it over there, but looking at the system that we exist in. And that's, to me, what you're describing. So if it's work, we're looking at the work system. If it's school, we're looking at the school system.
The unit, the family unit. Right, absolutely. And the thing is again, there's so many factors. When you think about children, we think about parenting, we think about school system, we think about the anxiety, the stress with social relationships. Maybe it's eating habits, maybe it's just the dynamics, having siblings. We've got in the US, 50% of our US parents are divorced. And so oftentimes I'm working with families in co-parenting. And so family dynamics, this whole family unit is important in therapy. And I do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy in general when I work privately in isolation with families too.
Well, the US has produced some amazing insights into systems and family work. You got the Palo Alto group that used to exist in California, which produced some amazing sort of very evidence-based interventions. You got Minuchin, who was based in Brazil, looking at families of the poor and all the systems work he did, and looking at how we define roles in families. And I think Minuchin was really interesting. He was one of the first people to say a family isn't genetics, a family is relationships, and identifying those relationships. And you were just talking about blended families there. And it's the roles that we play, I guess, and the roles that are ascribed. And that even goes towards mental illness as well, I think. And I don't know what you think about this, because this is why I don't work with children on their own, is because you can label a child with an illness, but it's a family's issue. And actually they may be carrying stuff for the whole family.
Well, if you think about, let's take anxiety, for example, right? I truly believe a lot of, we know this by the prevalence and increased numbers just from this pandemic, is society driven, attributed, right? And so, yes, you can have a child who's born with a predisposition and they have a natural sense. I mean, I saw it in my oldest daughter, who had this need to clean everything up exactly the right way as a toddler. And I just started to see some of those signs, but a lot of times individuals who have, and they call it the type A personality, have an anxiety underroot, but it's not that we're labeling or diagnosing them. When it becomes a challenge is you really can't get through your day. So all of us have some underlying challenge that doesn't really have to be labeled or identified, that we can treat. And that is ultimately
it's the XY measurement, isn't it? X being severity and Y being impact. If there's no impact, you could have technically the most severe anxiety in the world, but who cares? It doesn't really matter.
You're right. I mean, so many individuals have learned to compensate over time and just kind of find what works for them and work with it and deal with it. And so, but again, I don't want to lighten mental illness. I mean, there are individuals who truly have something very profound and should seek support for. But I want everyone to know that a lot of the strategies that I know I use in my therapeutic sessions, and why I took what I do to a larger media platform, is I really did feel that we can share what we do in a specific clinical setting with everyone, depending on how we present it, and it works. It's something that you can take and use and apply and work, and I think that's important.
And I think sort of, again, not to get too technical, but it's like the sort of evidence-based therapies that have grown up, such as CBT, DBT, MDR, etc., have really produced their sort of resilience-based models, if you like. So what they teach people is how to be more resilient to the way life is in reality. And often, I think what people do in terms of when they get these common mental health disorders and depression, anxieties, they adapt unhelpfully.
Right.
They're trying to manage the symptoms.
Yeah. If I could give a child anything, it would be coping skills and confidence early on. I mean, and that's the reason I wrote one of my books, is because I was getting teenagers and trying to just take apart old habits. And I would think in my head, wow, I wish I had you at age 5. I wish I had you at age 6. Here I am trying to talk to you as a 17-year-old. And it's just, it can be done, but it's a lot of, right?
I think it's really interesting. It's like the psychology prior to 5 and the psychology after 5 it's interesting, and largely because of the capacity to think about self, which doesn't really exist prior to 5. I mean, it's not like that precise, but
they're not developmentally there, right?
So let's talk a bit about that, and this is your area. So prior to 5, you know, what are the processes going on that make it significant? Because I think there's still, the reason I'm asking the question is this, because we were talking just before the show about various models of psychology over the years, and the original models of psychology, there were 2 dominant models, Freudian and Jungian, and the Freudian is the one people mostly know. And the idea was you were born with certain things, drives, and then life came along and messed you up. That's essentially what Freud said, and his idea was analysis. You learn about how much it's messed you up and then get depressed. And then post-Freudian said, well, no, it's not really like that. It's really important there are early nurturing relationships. Now, we maintain that early nurturing relationships are important, but it's more like, I guess I would use the term environmental impact these days. What's the environment of the child? Why is that important? And sort of what does it do in terms of child development?
Well, I mean, first of all, under age 5, and going, we're talking about philosophers and stuff. So I follow Piaget, right? Because it's a developmental.
Yes.
But very much things are concrete. So therapy looks a lot different for children who are under the age of 5. Why? Because you're right. Cognitive abilities, their cognitive skills are still developing. They're still at different stages of development. We've got children not until really 18 months, just long string sentences even.
Yes, exactly.
Approach. And so it's not that you cannot do therapy. We do a lot of play-based therapy. We do a lot of art therapy. They're just unable to articulate the way an older child would be able to articulate. Feelings are still there. Emotions are still there. We just do a lot of approach things very differently. When children are older, they're able to retain information, articulate via language. They're also able to, they're just observational learners, as all of them are, but they're able to really share and make those connections. And so I think, but I have to say, even with adolescents who are very egocentric, me, you know, that's their process of thinking. Definitely think about self, but it's really trying to get them now to think about thinking about others and outside of that. But to go back to your question about the environment, environmental factors, everything in the environment, I'm an optimist in general, but I'm a big believer that your environment plays a role in your mental health.
Yeah.
And it can change. And so, yes, if you have a parent who is an alcoholic in your house, and you take that parent outside of that dynamic, that unit, it is going to change that individual person in terms of their own wellness.
Interesting. Again, let's go back to that 0 to 18 months, because it's an interesting time, I think, that and the sort of symbiotic relationship that often exists between the infant and the primary carer. Which, are we okay with the shorthand mum for that, or do we need to? Is that okay?
Yeah.
And so Winnicott was an interesting sort of child analyst based in the UK, and probably one of the few psychoanalysts. I'm probably going to get letterbomb threats for this statement, but one of the few psychoanalysts who had a proper caseload, as I would understand it. Most psychoanalysts made up these grand theories after seeing 2 or 3 people for 20 years, and it's like, how on earth do you sort of make grand theories from that? I'm over egging that pudding, but it's relatively true. Whereas Winnicott worked in the NHS here in England, and actually in the East End, not far from me, and saw thousands of parents and children, and he was the one who came up with the notion of good enough parenting, for example. So you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be good enough, and kids are okay. But he had this really interesting statement, which is, there is no such thing as a mother and a baby. There is only a mother and baby unit. You cannot separate them psychologically, is what he was arguing, within that first 18 months. And actually, probably the separation process takes a lot longer than that, but certainly within that 18 months. You're nodding away. Is that something you sort of agree with?
Well, no, I disagree.
Okay.
And the reason being is,
Right.
I think early on, attachment theory, right? Let's talk about attachment theory. So children, I feel, are so codependent on a parent. It doesn't have to be either one, a parent, we can say, but typically it usually is the mother. And I think early on, and I do this in when I'm working with new families and new parents, they're so afraid to leave their child to go on a date, or just to go for a walk, or just even to take a shower. So it's one of those things that, yes, they're connected, but the bond doesn't have to physically be, you don't have to physically be present to be connected.
The child won't develop unless you disappoint them. That's the point. Well, meeting their needs.
Yes, you have to meet their needs.
They're going to be stuck.
Yes, as long as you're meeting their needs. Obviously, I'm not saying that you don't feed them, change them, give them their basic necessities, but autonomy is so important. And what I'm seeing over the years that I've seen is that children are less and less independent. And I'm looking back and I'm looking at these, you've heard the term, like these helicopter parents.
Yeah, over anxious parenting. I think that's right. I think it's the big problem of our times.
Enablers, right? These parents who are they're just know too much about they're not letting their children just separate. And a lot of it is fear. You know, growing up, I used to be able to walk myself to the park and just go play down the street, whereas but God forbid we let our child ride a bike outside by themselves. Yeah. And so, yes, it's part of what's happening in society.
And dangers to children. I mean, we should say this. I mean, just so that people know, we're not just talking off the top of our heads, but the real dangers to children haven't changed over the years. Stranger attacks are still very, very rare. A tiny percentage of the risks to children. The risks to children actually come from their own families.
It's just that we know more. I think that's what it is, right? That we see more. The media's everything's a breaking news moment, and but we didn't, if we didn't have quick media and we had the paper, maybe.
It's that thing, isn't it? The two things that capture our attention most as animals are fear, things that might kill us, and sex, things that keep the race going. That's it, the species going. So those two things, and that's what the media plays on, because it wants our attention, really. That's
And understandably, I mean, it's going to make any parent nervous. I mean, you have a child as well. And so you do think about, right? Your child's outside by them. You do think about.
Try not to, because
yeah, I know, but it takes over. And but you're human and we're human and we've been exposed to so much negativity. I wish, media would share so many good things, but it's breaking news. It's important things that you have to know. And though that has evolved over the years. And so we are more aware, but you're right. The numbers are the same. The numbers haven't skewed.
No?
Same number of just perpetrators and things.
The whole point about attachment, and this is those early sort of experiments in the strange situation, for example, and
right,
which you know well about. Tell us about.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to talk about with attachment is, and this is something that I've noticed too, is our children, a lot of our kids are not developing secure attachment. So this is where the parent can leave without a child feeling like that they're abandoned. And I'll give you an example. And I like to relate experiments and things to just real life situations. I do think it's important for a parent who drops their child off to their first, we call it daycare preschool program, to actually do say goodbye and reassure them that you're going to come back versus just sneaking away. And right away, that's a prime example of a child who hasn't developed, of a secure attachment, following Bowlby's secure attachment theory. So I think that's really one of the factors.
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, in the UK, there was I forget his name, Scottish analyst wrote Attachment and Loss. Those were the two books he wrote. And the idea was that secure attachment allows you to move away securely and explore. That's the idea. So you develop more social skills, whereas insecure attachment leaves you stuck in some unhealthy relationship to those early caregivers that you can't break away from. And
you can't break away, yes. And the emotional regulation, the ability, you can't explore if you're fixated, right, on the fact is that going back to what you're talking about, the fear, right? We're at a young age. So here we're talking about a child who cannot communicate. We're early on, toddler, infant age, and right away we're seeing signs of anxiety. Right?
There are interesting sort of in terms of attachment, and then allowing the child to individuate that. Children that are not allowed to individuate, and not socially allowed to do that, actually don't develop cognitively and intellectually in the same way.
And that goes back
to not even develop language at all if you're not. I mean, those are extreme stuff. So any parents listen to this, you're not like that. Like, this is me and Reena sort of getting into depth about things, but we shouldn't really talk like this on this.
Yes. I mean, I think the moral of the story, the moral of this particular conversation is really the goal is early on, teach your children independence, do it in a healthy way. Yes, you can move to the kitchen and prep for dinner and have your child play independently. You don't have to be sitting right next to them. And we're wanting to create healthy habits, a sense of security, sense of belonging. So when they do enter school, that they have the sense of security, knowing they're going to be dropped off and picked up.
And the process is, if you like, I mean, I think you probably agree with this, but children observe what you do much more than what you're saying to them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you model comfortableness about this, it's okay, I'll be back. And if you know that you'll be back, then they know that you'll be back.
Right. Well, and the thing is this, one of the things I wanted to say about that too is children develop receptive language ability before expressive skills. And what does that mean? That means they understand language before they can even communicate. So early on, not only is your child observing, but they also are taking in the words that you're saying. They're watching your movements, your moods and everything, but they're not able to tell you. So just know the minute you bring your baby into this world, the minute they're at home with you, they're watching your every move. They're
essentially what Piaget was saying, right? That language is encoded in play behavior. And so when we're naturally playing, like when we play peekaboo, for example, people don't need to know this, but peekaboo, when you go, hello, that gap, the 0.2 second gap is the same gap as we leave at the end of sentences, inviting people to come and respond.
Come and talk, right.
So, and it's like physically, and that's the important thing about the brain, I guess. And let's go on to this a bit. The brain really is primed for physical stuff and relational stuff, and that's how we learn. And so it's what you do that's important. And that was in many ways the big breakthrough with behavioral sort of understanding of psychology, and you're a behavioral specialist. So
yes, I love talking about behavior. I mean, we talk about
tell me about why is behavior important when it comes to psychology? Because people think psychology means it's all up here. If I just think about it, everything's going to be all right. But that's not true. It's not correct, is it?
So actions are so important. And when we hear the word behavior as a society, a community, we think negative, right? We immediately think, oh, there's a problem. But behavior is a human response to a precursor. We call them antecedents. So behavior is just tapping to the finger, twirling your hair, just communicating. Sleeping is a behavior. So everything that we do is a behavior, is some form, and its underlying function is communication. It's telling the world something. And so I think behavior is so fascinating because that's how we can create change, is by shaping one's behavior. And there's 4 functions of behavior. And the reason I want to share this is because oftentimes parents will say, I can't figure out the reason why my child is constantly crying, or why is my child always wanting to nag at my shirt every time I'm on the phone? Things like that. Just the common parenting challenges that everyone typically has. Or why is my child tantruming and in the grocery store, passing by a particular product that they want, and so really it's understanding this environment, what's happening before, and then also understanding what you are doing after and what the environment is doing to help reinforce or not reinforce a child after. And so sometimes they're trying to
ABCs, the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences. So
yes, your ABC of learning. And is it that oftentimes it's social attention, it's attention seeking. And this is the example I love giving, is the little one who they know they're not supposed to crawl up the stairs, right? It's not safe for them. We didn't put the baby gate, but
how do you get mum to freak out and get those lifted up and get those cuddles?
Yes, but they will look to you, they'll look to you to see if you're watching them before they go make that trek up the stairs, because they know you're going to respond to them. You're going to tell them no, and you maybe going to pick them up. And maybe underlying all that, they just wanted you to pick them up. They wanted your attention, right? So that's a very common response, attention-seeking behaviors you will see, when you're trying to do work and get an email, and then you've got the child running back and forth or hitting you with an airplane. What is that?
And the little buggers have figured it all out, haven't they? They know exactly which button to press, how to press it, and when to press it. And experts at it. Absolutely fantastic.
And or escape contingency is another one, and that is because our demands are too high, or we're asking too much. And this is the great ones that I love to talk to educators and teachers about, because oftentimes at school, I always get the call about this child is misbehaving, they're not listening, they're not attending. Well, I'm like, well, what are we asking them to do? Is it something they could feel successful at? Because the teacher will say, well, the child is dropping to the floor, not completing their work, running around, trying to bug another child, with the pencil. And so I said, well, let's look at what are we asking them to do, so that they're trying to escape out of that situation, right?
Absolutely. And it's much easier, and people know this as a sort of common sense thing, it's much easier to get bad attention and to control the failure, to be in charge of that failure rather than face a failure. So yeah, absolutely, really, really important things. It's lovely talking to you, because I know that you have a background in, just from the way you're talking, I know that you've worked with people that are pre-verbal or non-verbal, and you've been faced with, well, how do I relate to somebody who I can't use language with? And that might be a young child, but it also might be somebody with autism or a learning disability.
Yeah, I've worked with a 70-year-old individual who was in a residential facility who has autism. And so to me, behavior, it doesn't matter the age really when you've got a disability, because you understand the characteristics, the needs, the challenges.
It's also, I think, I was taught something, a psychologist colleague of mine said, all behavior is communication. And I went, oh God, that's true, isn't it?
The form of communication, you're absolutely right.
And sort of, again, people sort of understand in a common sense when we say things like 75% of communication is nonverbal, and we say that, and then we seem to forget that when we're dealing with troubling situations, and we just go straight to what's the verbal communication going on, rather than, well, what is the context? What's happening in the context? What is...
I mean, your colleagues at work, though, I mean, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but even it doesn't have to be related to children, right? No, I mean, you could be a coworker at work you're having a difficult time with, and really just kind of think about, well, what is my behavior expressing or communicating outward to them or around, or what perception could they be? And it'll really help. I always say, just be that detective, do a little bit of observation on your own and just observe what's going on.
Absolutely. I have no problem with you cutting in with your enthusiasm. It's just great. It's great that you're committed and passionate about what you do, that you're actually genuinely interested. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people will say to me, don't you get fed up of all this? Doesn't you get depressed by all these problems that you see people? And I'm like, no, actually, people are amazing. And the people I work with are extraordinary. I'm very in awe of them, to be honest. And I get that from you, which is an important point, because I think that there's something about, like, I think of it in these terms, sort of in a TA model. You think about a TA model as internal parent, internal adult, internal child. And what I'm looking to do as a mental health professional is always go for like a win-win situation, adult communication. And people tend to think of therapy as parent and therapy as child. And I think there's a very limited number of things that you can do there, because I'm always, unless it is actually a child, I'm always looking for somebody to move beyond me and think I'm not very useful and that they've got the skills themselves. I mean, that's my ultimate aim with anybody, is that they go, oh, that was very helpful. Now I'm going to get on with my life. And to do that as quickly as possible. I'm getting the same feel and vibe from you, that, you want to empower people to move on in their own time, but relatively as quickly as possible, with as many skills as possible, and never to come back, really.
Oh yes, my goal isn't to keep someone in therapy, but it's also to find what's meaningful to them, right? And so there's a difference between a coach and a psychologist, and a psychologist really is yes, you want to achieve something or get somewhere, solve something, but it really is, we want to go in history, we want to find what is limiting them. Yeah. And we also want to, this is under my philosophy of what's called applied behavioral analysis. Going into behavior is finding what's meaningful to the client, not what's meaningful to the parent, not what's meaningful to the corporation they're working for. What is it for that particular individual? And I know we're limited in time, but what I want to share to kind of wrap this up is that I work with parents have dreams for their children. They have, as soon as they're born, they've zipped so many years ahead, and they're going to be the scientist, the engineer, the lawyer, the doctor, who knows? But if it really isn't meaningful to your child, it's not going to be you and I are so motivated in terms of what we're doing, that we need to find something that what works for them within their capacity. And I have children who have disabilities who may not want to, cannot be that high level functioning corporate worker, but they want to play, but they want to play the guitar, and they want to learn how to play. And you know what? That's my goal, is to help them get to what it is that's meaningful to them.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an interesting conversation about the differences and similarities between psychology and coaching, and we don't have time to go into it. Maybe you can come back and talk about it. Essentially, I guess the point is, one is evidence-based and has lots of research behind it, the other doesn't, or the other has limited body of knowledge, really, and doesn't really deal with mental health. It deals with methodologies that free you up so that you have a more positive attitude towards yourself, if you like. But coming back to this idea of advocating, if you like, for the patient, the child, with their parents, and this would be the same if you're advocating for an adult in a work situation, I guess. That there's an ethical duty towards the person who is the patient, the identified patient. And I don't know if you've come across this, it may be slightly controversial, you may not want to go into it, but one of the things I am very thoughtful and careful about when I work with younger people who are in some way dependent on parents is whether or not the parents are asking me to pathologize their child because they can't get them to do what they want. And actually the child just doesn't want to do it, but they're not ill. They don't have a mental health problem, or they do in response to sort of overbearing parenting. Is that a familiar story to you, and sort of how do you deal with it?
You know, it's important. First of all, I get parents who say my child isn't motivated, or it's more of a discipline issue, where I see something furthermore than just a child who isn't intelligent, or, you know, does actually have the skill set. I will often hear my child's lazy or non-compliant or defiant. And so I really work with the individual, and then I work with the parents, but I do a lot of parent education. My first thing that I do is, where do you want to be? Where do you want my help? You know what I do. They've oftentimes researched me on my website, hasn't, you know, I did, and they come in with an idea, and then I really try to scaffold and shape it, make it more realistic.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's interesting because I think there are cultural differences in terms of how in the US you understand parenting and how in the UK we do. I think there are differences. I know because I work across both cultures, but there's a sense in the US, like when we in the UK watch films and we hear a teenager call their father sir or something like that, which does happen in the US, but it would never happen here, and it's a very different thing. And I wonder what you feel about these things, like these sort of wilderness therapy camps, I think they call them, but they look suspiciously like brat camps, you know. That
no, I'm not a big fan. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I am going to have to leave.
Finish. You've got to go. You've got a meeting. Look.
Yes,
quickly, how do we get hold of you? How do people get hold of you? What's your website?
www.reenabpatel.com. Follow me on my social media. I try every day to give some type of wisdom, some type of parenting tip or mental health tip at Reena B Patel on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. Have 2 books, Winnie and Her Worries. My friend Max, geared for little ones, specifically to help with their mental wellness.
Right. Well, we'll put all of those links and everything in the descriptions, and when we post that. It's been wonderful to have you on. I know you've got to go, and I'll hold that boundary, and maybe we'll get you back on another time.
That'd be wonderful. You take care.
And you have a great day, Reena. Really good to see you.